Good day and thank you for joining Civilnet. The armed clashes that resumed in Nagorno Karabakh on the night of April 1st have continued for the past 2 days. Here's an overview of today's developments. At around 7:25 a.m. this morning, the Nagorno Karabakh Ministry of Defense informed of an Azerbaijani extensive operation using heavy artillery and armored vehicles against Armenian military positions in Karabakh. Between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., the Mardagert region came under heavy shelling. Around 30 shells of different calibers were fired. Around midday, the Nagorno-Karabakh Defense Ministry reported that tense fighting continues along the southeastern and the northeastern segments of the Karabakh-Azerbaijani line of contact. Civilnet Tatul Hagopian and Hagop Manukyan, who are currently in Nagorno-Karabakh, reported that the population of Madaris and Talish were evacuated prior to a successful counter-offensive launched by the Karabakh Defense Army to retake an important military post in the area that had been taken earlier by the Azerbaijani armed forces. Following the operation, 2 Armenian soldiers were wounded, 2 Azerbaijani tanks and an armored vehicle were destroyed. Overall, yesterday and today, the Azerbaijani army lost 14 tanks, more than 5 armored vehicles, including 1 fighting infantry combat vehicle, 2 helicopters and 2 drones. The Karabakh army lost 1 tank reportedly. A statement disseminated early afternoon today by the Azerbaijani Defense Ministry announced that, taking into consideration international appeals, Azerbaijan would unilaterally suspend the counterattacks and response measures in the territories occupied by Armenia. This instantly made international headlines. CNN, Al Jazeera, Euronews, and many others announced that Azerbaijan declares unilateral ceasefire amid Nagorno-Karabakh violence. Armenian Defense Ministry spokesperson Artzrun Hovhannisyan's announcement calling the statement an information trap followed shortly. First-hand information and video footage sent by our correspondents in Nagorno-Karabakh confirmed that military actions had not ceased in the area and that the Mardagert region was still under intense mortar attack. Hours later, Nagorno-Karabakh authorities announced that they are ready to listen to and discuss a ceasefire, but only if the primary positions of both sides are restored. We discussed the announcement with political analyst Richard Giragosyan.
Look at the tactics. From the Azerbaijani point of view, we must give them credit for being innovative and original. In other words, this so-called unilateral truce was a very good bluff, because it unfortunately fooled much of the international media and the international community. Because all parties to the conflict, including Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia, of course would want to return to the ceasefire. What the Azerbaijani attack was a direct violation of the very ceasefire that they now claim to be offering. What's more important is 2 hours after supposedly offering this truce, Azerbaijani artillery units were still firing on civilian population centers in Mardagert. Now, what this also means that, similar to the Israeli wars in the Middle East, this offer of ceasefire is often much less about military tactics and much more about diplomatic dividends. And we still see Azerbaijan driven by a diplomatic calendar and timing, and driven by domestic dividends within Azerbaijan, which means for the Armenian military, it's very hard to respond and counter to such a reckless, unpredictable behavior that's not based on military logic. So in other words, until events on the ground confirm that the Azerbaijanis have silenced their guns, then there is no even likelihood of a truce or ceasefire. Moreover, there's little leverage. The West has very little leverage to pressure or persuade Azerbaijan to climb back down. The good news, however, is the events on the ground now in the 2nd day, where the Armenian side has the upper hand. In terms of Nagorno-Karabakh defense, much of the territory that was initially seized by the Azerbaijanis are now back in the hands of the Armenian forces and Karabakh forces. And what we see now is the Azerbaijanis suffered much higher level of loss in personnel and equipment than they expected when they first launched this offensive.
Many from across Armenia and Nagorno Karabakh have signed up to fight on the front lines. This footage was taken earlier in Stepanakert. In Yerevan, people were rushing to donate blood despite the assurance of the Ministry of Health that there is no shortage of blood reserves nor medication. Specialists confirmed that they have enough to treat everyone and there is no emergency. The Ministry of Health has also announced that 10 wounded have been transported to Yerevan today for medical care. Most are in a stable condition. The latest news from Karabakh is that the fighting is still continuing. Thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned for more reports.